Hello and welcome everyone to our September webinar in our 2024 Paleo series. I'm Tina Panic from the Avon Library here with Terry Wilson from the Historical Society and Jen Bennett from the Senior Center. And we're going to welcome our guest and then enjoy a fantastic evening and another presentation on archaeology. It's all yours, Terry.
Thank you. Let me slide this over. Okay. Good evening. On behalf of the Avon Historical Society, the Avon Library, the Senior Center, and the Planning Committee for this Unearthing History series, I welcome you to the fourth webinar in our fourth year of educational and informative events covering the people, animals, and land of the Paleo period 12,500 years ago. For those of you joining us for the first time, welcome. And for those who have been with us along this way, thank you very much and welcome back. We're happy to be joined by our partners, the Avon Land Trust, the Farmington River Watershed Association, and the Institute for American Indian Studies in Washington, Connecticut. We're bringing this to you thanks to a third-year grant from the Lower Farmington River and Salmon Brook Wild and Scenic Committee. Their funding comes from the National Park Service, which recognizes the importance of continuing education of all river matters in this country. The origin of this webinar series is the discovery in 2019 of the Brian D. Jones Paleo-Indian site along the Farmington River here in Avon, Connecticut, and the first public presentation of the site in February 2020, which began a deep exploration into this incredible time in our world's history. If you want to learn more, visit the Avon Historical Society's website and drop down the page for the Brian D. Jones Paleo-Indian site. This webinar, in our last one, with our last one being next month, brings us to another site that has unique and fascinating history. The Ohio Hopewell site, made up of indigenous earthworks in 8 locations in Ohio, that is now the 25th World Heritage Site in the United States. The National Park Service, which manages most of the World Heritage Sites in the U.S., applied and received this important designation just a couple years ago in 2022. These sites have been determined to be 2,000 years old and are considered among the most creative places of ceremony aligned with the sun and moon in North America. But there's more. Assistant Professor Katherine Sterner of the Department of Sociology, Anthropology, and Criminal Justice at Towson University in Maryland will explain to us how shark teeth found at the Hopewell sites came to be there and what they were used for by Native peoples. Professor Sterner works with students through the Baltimore Community Archaeology Lab, a Towson University program that pairs archaeology students with community partners to document and preserve cultural resources across the region. Their discoveries have allowed them to partner with local Native American communities to create an indigenous voice in historical narratives based on their finds. As you saw on the welcome slide at the beginning, next month, the last webinar in our 4-year series will be presented by Brad Lepper, senior archaeologist at the Ohio History Connection, which oversees the Hopewell sites. He will wrap up our 4 years with a presentation entitled Paleo-Indian Discovery of America. We hope you will join us for that last presentation. But for now, I'd like to toss it to Jen Bennett from the Avon Senior Center.
Good evening, everyone. This is Jennifer from Avon Senior Center. I would like to say that we are very excited to continue our journey of all of these talks, and I'm really excited for tonight's talk because we just get to learn something new every time. I will say that the Senior Center is very happy to be able to collaborate with the Avon Historical Society and the Avon Free Public Library, as well as our other sponsors and collaborators. I just want to make a shout out that September is National Senior Center Month. So in addition to that, we all get to celebrate together and enjoy this wonderful program with a fantastic presenter. So thank you, and let's get to a great presentation.
All right, Katherine, it's all yours.
I guess that's me. All right. Well, thank you for the introduction, Terry, and I really appreciate you all having me. I'm gonna share my screen here and we'll talk about some shark teeth. All right. So, this is the reason that I think Terry approached me about doing this presentation is because we're interested in talking about use-where analysis. And so that's a specialized archaeological method for, as you might expect, determining the use of something that we find on an archaeological site. And so one of the cooler ways that I've used use-where analysis in this recent project is to look at fossil shark teeth. So I'll spend a little bit of time talking about the method and a little bit of time talking about the teeth and where we're finding them, and then what we can say about what people are doing in the past based on these type of methods. So I think I should really start by talking a little bit about what we know about Native Americans and shark teeth. Really the first historically documented evidence that pre-European Native American cultures were interested in shark teeth was identified by a couple of gentlemen by the names of Squire and Davis in 1848, when they excavated very large holes into several mounds on the Hopewell farm in Ross County, Ohio. And Squire and Davis discovered several modified shark teeth associated with burials that originated in the geologic, obviously the shark teeth aren't coming from Ohio. They must have come from geologic deposits outside of the Ohio Valley. So since these initial finds, there have been multiple attempts to collate the shark teeth from archaeological contexts in Ohio. The most recent of these was by a gentleman by the name of George Colvin, who's published a couple of articles on the topic, especially in 2011 and 2014. And he identified a total of 164 shark teeth from archaeological contexts in Ohio. Of these 164, 161 were fossilized. So only 3 of them were modern shark teeth. So you can see that there's a real emphasis on fossil shark teeth. Not too surprising, since you don't have any sharks swimming around in Ohio for you to get recent shark teeth from. So the primary areas of study for shark teeth from Ohio archaeological sites have historically focused on their function and their source. Where are they coming from? And it's been generally assumed that the fossil shark teeth found in the Ohio Valley originated from ancient marine deposits that extend from Florida up to South Carolina. And this assertion was supported by George Colvin, who has conducted the most complete examination of Ohio Valley shark teeth. However, there's a couple of folks led by Darren Lowry who have made an argument that the Miocene deposits of Maryland and the greater Chesapeake region more generally represent a more likely source of these fossil shark teeth, particularly for the Hopewell period people, which we're talking early and middle woodland peoples around 2,000 to 3,000 years ago. Additionally, there are some other authors who have documented shark teeth at archaeological sites throughout the northeastern United States and the maritime provinces. So they're not isolated to just these contexts that I'm talking about today. So when we talk about shark tooth function, there's a couple different ways that we can conceptualize this. Typically, the function of shark teeth recovered from Ohio sites has been considered separately from their origin. So people haven't really looked at both of these questions at the same time. And the association of shark teeth with Hopewell ceremonial sites has led to a primarily focus on what we call the sociotechnic function of these objects, as opposed to their technomic function. So there's a famous archaeologist who was working in the 50s called Louis Binford, who came up with these terms of sociotechnic and technomic. And basically, when you think about objects that you use, they can have multiple types of functions, right? So something, I can have a silver spoon that I can use for a technomic purpose, right? I can use it to serve mashed potatoes, but it might also have a sociotechnic purpose in that it was handed down to me from my grandmother, and it's a status symbol, right? That I have this nice silver spoon. So the sociotechnic function is the function that isn't necessarily focused on the utilitarian value of the object. And so because shark teeth do not originate in Ohio, and they're found in these burial contexts. Typically, people have really focused and said they must be ceremonial. Archaeologists have this kind of habit of when we don't know what something is used for, we're just like, it was ceremonial. But that's a little simplistic maybe, right? So usually things have more than one function. And so I wanted to be able to get at what some of these other functions were. They've typically been interpreted as religious amulets or items of personal adornment. And you can see here in this picture some of the holes that have been drilled in these teeth, potentially so that they could be worn as a necklace. In Ohio, shark teeth have been recovered exclusively from burial and ceremonial contexts, which contributes, I think, to this catch-all ceremonial label. That's not the case in other areas. So in particular, Florida is a really good example. There's a lot more fresh shark teeth on Florida archaeological sites than there are fossil shark teeth. And in Florida, people have conducted use-wear analyses to determine the function of these shark teeth, like what physical tasks they might have been used for. But nobody's done that previously on Ohio shark teeth. They've just kind of assumed function based on the context that they were found in. Found in a ceremonial context, must have a ceremonial function. But I wanted to test that hypothesis. So there's a really limited understanding of the role of shark teeth at Ohio sites. And I wanted to pursue both what the function of these shark teeth is and then where people are getting them from. So the goal of this study was to examine questions of Ohio shark tooth function and origin together, not separately. So I had a sample of 9 fossil shark teeth from Ohio archaeological sites and examined those for use-wear. And I'll explain a little bit what use-wear is if you're not familiar. So I contextualized the data from these 9 Ohio shark teeth with data from 6 fossil shark teeth from Maryland archaeological sites and 7 fossil shark teeth from Florida archaeological sites. So I was able to compare the species that were represented, the archaeological context that were represented. So what kind of sites are these coming from, the time period, the type of site. Are we talking burials? Are we talking villages, hunting camps? And the use-wear data. So what were they being used for? All of those things together kind of can give us a more holistic narrative about the role of shark teeth in Ohio. So to speak first about species, the first thing I looked at was which species are represented in these samples. And granted, this is a limited sample, right? Although the sample from Maryland sites and Ohio sites is pretty representative of the entire assemblage from those states. These are the species that are most commonly identified there. So in the Ohio sample, I had 1 bull shark, 6 extinct megalodon shark. Those are the 2 big ones that you saw, the really big ones you saw, and 2 great white shark. Species in the Maryland sample included 1 great white shark, 4 extinct megalodon shark and 1 snaggletooth shark. And then there was also 1 fragment that we were unable to identify the species because it was so fragmentary. And then the Florida sample included 3 lemon shark, one tiger shark, and 3 that were only identified to the family level, not to the species level, as requiem shark. So you can see that there's a pretty diverse amount of species that are represented in these samples, and they differ from each geographic area that we're talking about, Maryland versus Ohio versus Florida. So all of these shark teeth that I looked at were found on archaeological sites. It's not something that we were picking up on the beach, but something that was found during the course of archaeological excavation. So the Ohio sample comes from 9 different locations, and only 4 of those were previously recorded archaeological sites. Those 4 were the Western Haver Mound in Mound City, the Troyer site, and Wallace Farm. So just to talk a little bit about each of these sites, Western Haver Mound is an Adena burial mound. So this is a little bit earlier than the Hopewell period. It's in South Central Ohio in Pickaway County. Mound City is one of the most famous Hopewell sites. It's got over 25 mounds that are surrounded by linear earthworks, and that's located also in South Central Ohio. The Troyer site represents a Hopewell habitation site, so not a mound site specifically. That's in Madison County in Central Ohio. And Wallace Farm is an Adena, so another earlier site in Harrison County in East Central Ohio. The remaining 5 Ohio teeth were surface collected in farm fields that were not associated with currently documented archaeological sites. However, these were all came from the private collection of George Colvin, who lent them to me for this analysis. And they were all found with other archaeological materials. They're just not recorded in the state's site database yet. So they're definitely archaeological sites. They just hadn't been recorded prior to this analysis. So based on the other artifacts that were found with 2 of the teeth, one of them is identified as Hopewell, and the other one is Adena, so a middle woodland and an early woodland. And then the 2 remaining teeth, we really can't assign to a cultural temporal a time period because we just don't have enough other artifacts to assign a time period. The Maryland sample comes from 5 different archaeological sites. So just to talk a little bit about each of these sites, because the contexts are a little bit different than they are in Ohio. The first one is from Windy Knoll, which is a 17th century Piscataway fortified settlement. So we're talking much later, post-European arrival, actually. There's Cumberland Palisaded Village, which is in Calvert County, and that's multiple time periods. So that was occupied during the Archaic, which is immediately after the Paleo-Indian period that you guys have been hearing about thus far, and then also early and middle woodland. That was a short-term camp during those time periods, and then later, so immediately prior to the arrival of Europeans during the late woodland period, there's a palisaded village. So a lot going on there. People lived there for a long time. Again, this is a domestic context, so not a burial context. The Holland Point site is from Dorchester County. This is an early and late Archaic, as well as an early woodland short-term camp. And is also a shell midden during the middle and late woodland. So again, really wide time span that this tooth could have come from at that site. Rosenstock 1, which is a late woodland village in Frederick County. So that one's kind of off in the hinterlands, not near the Chesapeake Bay. So that's a little unexpected. And then the Reeves site, which is a multiple components again, late Archaic, early Middle, and late Woodland village. So two of the counties that these sites are found in, Calvert and Dorchester counties, border the Chesapeake Bay. Two are adjacent to the bay, Charles and Wicomico counties, and then Frederick County is approximately 50 miles from the bay. So still a lot closer than Ohio, but not as close. And then lastly, we have our Florida sample. So the Florida sample comes from 4 archaeological sites, and all of these are located in Everglades National Park. So these are mostly quite early sites. They're either very early or very late. So there's a late archaic site called Iron Grape Hammock, and then Heartleaf Hammock is another late archaic site. And then there's 2 late woodland sites as well, Moosa Hammock and Paoki Lookout Tower. So we have 4 sites that these Florida shark teeth come from. So in this case, we have multiple teeth coming from one site sometimes. So let's talk about what we did with the teeth then. So I don't know if anyone is familiar with use-where analysis, but I'm going to kind of give an overview of the history of the method, how it works, the way that other people use it, and the way it's practiced in general in archaeology, and then how we use it in this particular project. So use-where analysis, which is sometimes called micro-where analysis, was developed originally by a Russian scientist, Sergei Semenov, in the 1960s. But his work didn't get published in English until the late 70s. And so by then, there were other practitioners in the United States that had started doing the same work. And there were 2 broad approaches to how people do use-where analysis. One is what we call the low power approach, and one is the high power approach. And there was, during the early period of use-where analysis, a real friction between practitioners of each of these methods, trying to determine which method was better, is going to give you the best information, the most information, the most accurate information, and that sort of thing. So the way that use-where analysis works, essentially, is it requires there to be some sort of analogy between a known object, a known tool that you know what it was used for, and an archaeological tool that you're trying to determine what it was used for. And you look for traces of wear under the microscope in order to try to determine what it was used for. So when I say traces of wear, what I mean are generally these 3 categories. So we look for microchipping, edge rounding, and types of polish. So the way that this works, and this is typically done, is started out on stone tools. Since then, people have used the method on bone pretty successfully and antler, but mostly it's been done on stone. Until I did the shark teeth, that was exclusively what I had used the method on. And so if you think about it, you take a pair of scissors, right? And if you use those scissors to open a box, then there's going to be some friction between the edge of the scissors and the box. And depending on what type of surface you're using these scissors on, is it a cardboard box or is it right? Them on the cement, what's that going to do to the edge of your scissors? Well, it's going to be different depending on the contact material that the scissors are coming in used for. So when something is used on a soft substance like meat or plant material or hide, then you typically see a lot more edge rounding and less chipping, less fracturing along the edges. If it's been used on a harder substance like antler, bone, stone, those sorts of things, then you see more microchipping. If it was used in a scraping motion, what we call a transverse motion, so sort of perpendicular to the working edge, then you would expect to see rounding or chipping on one side of the edge, right? The side that's coming in contact while it is scraping. If you're using it in what we'd call longitudinal motion, so moving parallel to the working edge, kind of like a sawing motion, then you would expect to see chipping and rounding on both sides because both sides are coming in contact with the worked material. In addition to rounding and microchipping, we also have different types of polish that develop, and we can identify broad categories of contact material types based on the way this polish looks. So what we do to sort of make a key for ourselves to identify polish types is we do a lot of experiments. So I make some stone tools and then I use them in a bunch of different tasks, right? So I use one to cut meat. I use another one to scrape hide. I use another one to cut grass, right? So I have all of these different functions that I can identify. And then I look at it under the microscope and I see, what does it look like? So if I have a tool that I know I used for 30 minutes to cut grass to make mats or something like that, and I look at that under the microscope and I can say, okay, it's got polish that looks flat and shiny and it's got these circular shaped pits on it. That's what plant polish looks like, right? I know that that's what it looks like because I know exactly what I used it for. So then when I look at an archaeological tool that I don't know what it was used for because I didn't use it and I can't ask the person who did use it, I can say, oh, it looks just like my plant polish sample. So it was probably used on plant polish, right? So we use this analogous reasoning to reason from what we do know to what we don't know. And so there's a strong experimental component to use-where analysis. So in order to use this sort of approach for the type of study that I'm doing here, I had to ask a couple questions about how it's going to work with archaeological samples that aren't stone, right? Because I'm used to doing this on stone tools. So if you take a look at this slide, right, we've got some really big chert bifaces or maybe a small scraper. So how does this actually work on teeth? So one of the things that we had to determine is if the wear is going to look the same. So I've conducted use-where analysis on lots of different types of material. If you look at the two types of stone up here, right, the one that's under the microscope and the one that's just off to the side, you can see they look really different. One's more grainy than the other. They're different colors, different mineral composition. Those look a little bit different under the microscope. They've got a similar chemical composition though. So I can, within a reasonable margin of error, identify polish it looks relatively similar, no matter the type of stone that you have. Okay, but what about teeth, right? Does use wear on stone look the same as use wear on teeth? Does plant polish on stone look the same as plant polish on teeth? Or does it look different? Because the material you're starting with, the stone versus the tooth, is a different material, right? So does it interact with your contact material differently or not? So nobody's done experimental use wear analysis of fossilized shark teeth. I was very sad to determine that this was not the case. There's a group of folks from Brazil who have conducted extensive experiments with shark teeth, but they are all fresh teeth, not fossilized ones. So in the vein of analogic reasoning, I decided to consider the chemical composition of the teeth, right? So do they have a similar chemical composition to chert, which is the type of stone that we typically see people using for stone tools? There is some evidence that the chemical composition of Miocene fossil shark teeth may be similar to that of chert, which is silica dioxide is the primary component, which is the most commonly used material in experimental lithic use wear studies. And by lithic, I just mean stone. The mechanisms of the process of fossilization aren't fully understood, but paleobiologists agree that it consists of the transformation of a partially mineralized internal skeleton of a living organism into a fossil, now a stone organism, essentially. And Miocene fossils are typically composed primarily of calcium oxide and potassium oxide. Instances of silica replaced fossils during the Miocene are relatively rare, although there are some examples of fossils with high silica dioxide content that have been recorded. So there's some similarities chemically between chert and fossilized shark teeth. So it made me think that use wear patterns on the Miocene fossil shark teeth might be comparable to those on chert, but I couldn't bank on that. So I figured I better test that hypothesis. So I took two unprovenienced, previously unused fossil megalodon teeth. I have a friend who's a collector who found some on a beach for me, and they were busted, so he wasn't interested in keeping them in his collection. So I was like, I'll take them. And I selected those from my contact at the Natural History Society of Maryland. So I was going to use each of those in an experiment. So prior to using them experimentally, I washed them for 20 minutes in an ultrasonic cleaner with warm water and dish soap. I used one for 30 minutes to cut grass, and then I used the second one for 30 minutes to scrape dried deer hide. After I used them, I washed them in the ultrasonic cleaner with warm water and dish soap again for another 20 minutes. Then after that, I looked at them under my Olympus BX53M. It's a metallurgical microscope, and examined them at 50 times, 100 times, and 200 times magnification. I took pictures. I have a 5 megapixel camera with the Olympus Stream Basics software to document wear patterns. And essentially, the microscopic wear patterns that I saw were comparable to those that I identified on chert, right? So these pictures might not look super identifiable to you. I'm always told they look like the surface of the moon, but to me, I can say, okay, yes, by and large, these two are they look the same type of wear patterns. So as with chert, the hallmarks of plant polish on the first tooth that I used experimentally was this bright, smooth polish that analysts typically call silica gloss. It's very flat, and it has these comet-shaped pits. The dry hide polish that was on the second tooth that I used had a very dull, greasy polish with rounded ridges, just like it does on chert again. So that was a very positive result, and that allowed me to interpret the use-wear patterning on the fossil shark teeth from archaeological contexts based on, again, an analogic comparison with the large experimental chert collection I've already used for a lot of previous studies. So for this particular study, what I did to prep each tooth was I washed them for 20 minutes in an ultrasonic cleaner with warm water and dish soap. And then I examined each tooth at 50 times, 100 times, and 200 times magnification. Took photomicrographs in order to document the wear patterns so that I could compare them after the fact. So what did I see? Of the 22 fossil teeth examined, 6 exhibited evidence of wear from use. And an additional 14 exhibited polish and striations from saltation, which is just the term for the movement of hard particles like sand over an uneven surface in the turbulent flow of water, which you would expect for a fossil shark tooth. 2 teeth were not completely transformed into silicates during fossilization. And I'll show you a picture of those. You can really see the difference between the fully fossilized ones and the not fully fossilized ones. So because they hadn't fully turned into essentially stone, which is what fossils are, I was not able to interpret wear patterns on those 2 teeth that weren't fully fossilized. So what did I find based on the use-wear analysis? Of the 6 used teeth, 4 exhibited polish that was indicative of use on plant matter, while 2 of them exhibited meat polish. All 4 teeth were used in a perpendicular motion, like slicing, based on the direction of the striations that I saw in the polish. 1 tooth was used in both a parallel and a perpendicular motion on plant matter. There is also 1 tooth that I couldn't determine the direction of use because there weren't any striations. So what does this mean? I think it provides an opportunity for discussion of multiple points of interest. The first of these is that there are wear patterns on teeth from all 3 localities. They're common to teeth from all 3 localities. Number 2, we can talk about a comparison of species and wear patterns across localities. And then number 3, a temporal pattern of shark tooth use across localities. So changes through time, right? Patterning that we see through time. So I will say there were multiple challenges to conducting the use-wear analysis of fossil shark teeth. Other authors before me have noted that most fossil shark teeth have been polished through saltation after their geological deposition and prior to their acquisition by Native American people, right? So after the shark died, it turns into a fossil. It then gets rolled around in the sand and the water for probably thousands of years, maybe even millions of years in some cases, prior to being picked up by a Native American and then used. So distinguishing saltation wear from human use wear took a little bit of getting used to. And it helped that I was able to examine fossil shark teeth from non-archaeological and do a lot of comparing between the 2. So I was able to, through that comparison, I could come up with 2 patterns to distinguish these 2 types of wear. Wear. There's not any evidence that these teeth were being used as like piercers, so the tip isn't getting a lot of wear on it. The second point is that if you have, am I freezing up on you guys? Am I doing okay here?
You were, but it seems back to normal now. Nope, now you're frozen. There seems to be like a little delay. If you could maybe repeat the last thing you just said, that would probably be helpful.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna keep going then. Let me know if I need to stop. So if there are these multi-directional striations that are just kind of going all over the place every which way, then that's also indicative of saltation wear. If the striations aren't all going one direction or another direction, they're just going all over, that means you've got those particles of sand that are scraping all different directions all over the tooth. So that was an easy way for me to try to make those distinctions. All right. So one of the other challenges that I encountered is the fact that since these artifacts, many of them came from museum contexts, it's pretty common to label your artifacts with these labels on the artifacts themselves. Clear B72 acryloid completely obscures the polish underneath it, and it's often located on the labial side of the tooth, which is where the polish is most likely to be visible because of its relatively flat surface. So here you can see in this picture, there's a nice number 8 painted on this tool that's at 50 times magnification. The picture on the left, you can see a clear line down the center. The right is the surface of the tooth, and to the left is all of this polish from the label that really obscures everything underneath it. So in order to get those out of the way, you'd have to completely remove the label, usually using acetone, and that's nobody likes to do that. So the moral of that story is try not to label on your artifacts, be a little tougher. Nevertheless, we're still able to make some good assertions about use wear. So for one, use wear, when it was present, was located on the mesial and distal edges of the tooth, not on the apical end. So this suggests a slicing or a cutting motion rather than a stabbing or a piercing motion. Of the 6 specimens that were exhibiting use wear, 2 were from Maryland and 4 were from Ohio. None were from Florida. What about the species represented? 2 were great white shark and 4 were megalodon sharks. 2 of the Ohio specimens with use wear were from Adena sites, so those early woodland sites, and 2 were from Hopewell sites. Both Maryland specimens were from the Holland Point site, which is in Dorchester County. And I think that it's interesting that there's continuity in the types of use wear patterns, which are evident on the teeth. So that suggests a connection between the Maryland teeth and the Ohio teeth. And those similarities continue beyond just the use wear patterning. In addition to similarities in use wear patterning, the Ohio and Maryland sample frequency of fossil shark teeth in comparison to fresh teeth. Previous research has indicated that the vast majority of shark teeth recovered from archaeological sites in Florida are fresh. This is not the case at Ohio or Maryland sites. The lack of fresh shark teeth at Ohio sites is to be expected since there aren't sharks readily available there. However, both sandbar sharks and bull sharks are still relatively common in the Chesapeake Bay. In addition to sand tiger and great white sharks in the coastal areas around Maryland. Sites in Maryland with fresh shark teeth are very, very rare. So it has been argued that the high frequency of shark tooth use in Florida is linked in part to the fact that there's not really any sources of on fossil shark teeth at both Maryland and Ohio sites is indicative of a shared praxis around teeth, right? So praxis just meaning set of practices that people engage in. And this extends to the prevalence of certain species in the three regions. Great white and megalodon teeth are the most common teeth found at Maryland and Ohio sites, while tiger and lemon shark teeth are the most common teeth found at Florida sites. Great white shark teeth are the third most common species in Florida archaeological sites, but over 90% of the specimens are fresh rather than fossilized. So that's pretty different. So again, the patterning here is more similar between Maryland and Ohio than it is between Florida and Ohio. So what does this all mean? The thing we wanted to look at with the study was a combination of the function of shark teeth and their geographic origin. So while the sample size for this study is relatively small, it does provide us with some additional data to add to the discussion around the source of shark teeth found at Ohio early and middle woodland archaeological sites. So George Colvin and others before him have argued that most fossil shark teeth found at Ohio archaeological sites could be sourced to Florida because it's the only location where all of the species at Ohio archaeological assemblages were accessible. However, again, Darren Lowry and his colleagues noted, quote, fossil shark teeth found at archaeological sites do not match the proportions of teeth found along Calvert County beaches, rather disproportionately representing the rarest species, whose teeth are for the most part larger and lancet-shaped. Not surprisingly, Native Americans were preferentially selecting mostly large fossil shark teeth that were best suited to purposes as a hafted tool, or an admired curio, or a valued item for trade. So the use-where data, I think, clearly further support Lowry et al.'s claim that fossil shark teeth from archaeological contexts are more similar between Ohio and Maryland than they are between Florida and Ohio. And so while this is a very preliminary result here, it's been helpful to recognize that we are able to conduct use-where analysis on fossil shark teeth and learn what they're being used for. They're not just, quote, ceremonial. They have a technomic function. People are actually using them for things besides just personal adornment. And the way that they're being used, the way that they're being acquired, and the types of species they're being acquired from are most similar between Ohio and Maryland, not Ohio and Florida, which suggests that it's more likely they're coming from Maryland and not from Florida to get to these Ohio sites. But as always, we've got some more work to do to figure out if that's really the case. And I actually just found one more fossil shark tooth, the first one from an archaeological site in Baltimore County when I was doing field work this summer. So we've got another one for our sample to continue pursuing these questions. So that's all I have. And I'd like to thank especially the folks who lent me their shark teeth, George Colvin, the Southeast Archaeological Conservation Lab, and the Maryland Archaeological Conservation Lab, as well as Adrian Malik, who gave me his shark teeth for experiments, my students who took all these photographs of shark teeth for me, and Darren Lowry, who really helped turn me on to this line of questioning. And you guys for attending my talk. So thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. If the audience has any questions, pop them in the chat or the Q&A. I wanted to ask, do you have a favorite aspect of the analysis? I think I've asked almost all of our archaeologists that. Do you have a part that you enjoy the most?
Um, yeah, I really like seeing polish on tools. I think it's really exciting to when you first pop it under the microscope and you're like, oh, I wonder if this is used or not. And you know, you can tell immediately if it is or not. Not necessarily what it was used for right away. That takes a little bit more study, but the the first one that you pop under there that's actually used is pretty exciting.
Okay, cool. All right.
So I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Terry.
The ones that you showed that were probably pendants and had the little holes in them, those drills were probably stone tool drills. I'm assuming is the stone harder than the dentin of the tooth or whatever, or is it the tooth itself that's harder? How those holes look really kind of precise. Are they easy to drill with stone?
They're not easy to drill, I would imagine. I haven't drilled any of them myself. Typically, the way I understand it is done is you would need to have grit, which would be sand in most cases, and water to add friction as you're drilling in there. So most of the drilling that I've seen done has been through shell or softer stones like pipestone, soapstone. So exactly how they were drilling these is a really good question. That's a good experiment for us to try.
Right, right.
And it seems our audience is shy this evening, so I think that means you have covered everything on the topic that our audience wanted to know. So thank you for sharing your expertise, Catherine. It's been lovely to have you as part of our series. Terry, any closing words for the audience?
Well, all I want to do is just thank everybody again for participating and joining in tonight, and looking forward to our last one next time. And then we'll be doing a quick review of the last 4 years in about 3 minutes the next time. So join us in October. I think it's October 10th. And it'll be kind of an overview of Paleo-Indian discovery in America. And I'm looking forward to that and looking forward to seeing you all then. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.